Hello and welcome to The Digital Insight, the technology, procurement and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those who are leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Welcome to The Digital Insight, the official podcast series for CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. My name is Nell, and today I'll be chatting with Marius Galdikas, CEO of ConnectPay, a digital banking alternative for online-focused businesses. Marius and I will be discussing why digital finance is in such a vulnerable yet powerful position right now and what its future holds. So welcome, Marius, to the Digital Insight podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about digital banking, particularly how COVID-19 has impacted that industry, which it has done in some quite serious ways from what I can see. So first, it would be really great if you could tell me a little about your background and your role within ConnectPay as well.
Yes, thank you for having me. Sure. I originally come from the area or field of technology. I'm a physicist, always have been marveled by engineering and technology and digital technology specifically. And as I went through my career throughout the years, at some point in time I shifted into products and then shifted into fintech, which was very exciting to me because fintech is really all it is. It's people and technology, two things that make up that business. So good people that understand regulation, understand the business, and understand technology. I am now the CEO of ConnectPay.
Well, I wanted to kind of dive a little bit more into, like you said, fintech is really interesting. And I read some data recently which said that cyberattacks on financial institutions, especially traditional financial institutions, has had a massive spike during the lockdown period between February and April. So I wondered if you had any insight on why that's happened and how cybersecurity has adapted to adjust to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the main reason of why it happened is actually at the core of the pandemic, which means that pandemic means people are locked up at home, and so you end up with much more users of digital financial services than there usually are, right? So cash is unusable at this time when you're locked up. So you have a lot of new customers in the digital finance, which some of them are, are tech savvy and others are not. There's a lot of people that never used digital financial services and now they must. So you have this influx of customers into the market. That's number one. Number two, governments reacted and you had these stimulus programs released, which means there's a lot of funds being distributed through different programs, and many of those funds are meant for for relieving the consequences of joblessness and so on and so forth. So you have a lot of new funds moving around, and because all of it is happening in the digital finance area, I think that stirred up the whole fraudster community, and so fraudsters are working hard now to try and use the situation to steal funds from people, which results in the information security threats and cyber attacks. Cyber attacks are means of achieving the goals for fraudsters. So I think all of that boils down to the basis of what the pandemic makes people do: sit at home and use financial services online.
So how has that been combated? What's been the reaction to that?
So I think it's a very big challenge. It's twofold. Number one is obviously all of the financial services providers that already operate online, they have their assets online, they have the required technology and so on and so forth. Could that have been changed so fast? No. I mean, information technology requires Information security specifically requires a lot of work and insights, and it's a lengthy process to deploy specific tools to combat that. So I don't think much has changed. I think a realization came that this is now a very important area. Fraud prevention is now a very important area. So from the perspective of customers, it's just a realization that the companies were able to come up with, right? And maybe focus some resources to strengthen the fraud controls. On the other hand, there's what is another big risk is that employees are also, of these financial institutions, they had to go home and start working from home. So many of the companies, especially older banks, could have issues or could have had issues, and will continue to have, because people are working from home, which exposes the entire organization to much more risk. So I think there has been a lot of development in the companies that I've seen, in terms of combating that risk. So employee-related risk, right? How do you secure that your employees that are managing funds and managing customer information and so on and so forth can securely work from home? So that is the area where I did see specific actions being taken by companies, but on the customer front, not so much. It will take more time.
Yeah, I guess it's just been more of a case of being vigilant and just being aware that that's going to be an issue that's more prevalent than usual.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So as well as that increased awareness, what have been some of the digital banking trends since the emergence of the pandemic? How have people changed the way they handle money? You mentioned there that we're not using cash really at the moment, and that's obviously a major change. Is there anything else, any other specific changes that you've seen?
Yes, and I think those. So the sort of stride towards a cashless society that has obviously been accelerated forcefully, been forced onto people. Some people, some countries and some companies will do better than others, but I think majority of the change is yet to come, because the pandemic will result in economic hardship, and economic hardship will result in changes, in innovation, just like we had the previous like 2008 crisis, right? That gave the birth to Bitcoin, crowdfunding, sharing economies. All of that was an outcome of the economic crisis, of the financial crisis, and I think we will see something come up that we cannot even imagine right now. What is the driver for those changes, right? Previously in 2008, what we had was there was a huge loss in trust towards financial institutions, right? So the financial sector was the reason behind the crash, and so trust was lost. And so all of these instruments, right, crowdfunding, sharing economy, blockchain technology, all of those were targeted specifically at, hey, we don't trust financial institutions anymore. How can we, what can we do to exclude them from the economy altogether? So what will happen now, I think, will be the same. The same in the aspect, depending on the size of the downturn of the economy. I've been hearing that, the Western, the developed, markets, the Western European countries have been hit very hard by financially by the pandemic. This will continue. There will be financial problems. It's different because previously everybody lost jobs and so on and so forth, and salaries went down and income went down. Now it's a bit different, different aspects to how the hardship, what the hardship will be like. But it will still, I think, I'm going around in circles, but it will result into something that I cannot I cannot come up with right now, right? I don't know. I'm sure we should be on the lookout of what will be the repercussions of the financial hardship that we're about to encounter, and it will give birth to some new ideas and new technologies.
Yeah, I imagine so, because I feel like at a time when people are very aware of their finances, a lot of people having lost their jobs or at least lost part of their income, that I know from personal experience that people are relying on things like the financial apps that you have that just keep on top of what money you're spending, and they tuck a little bit away every month to make sure you're saving. Things like that, that I feel like that's the kind of element that will continue to evolve and continue to be something that people really rely on, and that will reinforce some trust in the digital side of financial management.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But again, like it will depend on how the financial sector will handle the fraud situation, right? Like, for example, the cybersecurity threats that we're facing right now. So, it's easier for smaller and more nimble fintechs to adapt to new environments. It's harder for the big banks to adapt to the new environments, meaning the whole, the lockdown and more users, more funds being thrown around, and more fraud. So as a result of that fraud, what could happen is, if, let's say, financial institutions or fintechs do not manage to protect their customers, it could mean, while the banks do manage to protect their customers and their consumer funds and money, what might happen is, the small fintechs might lose trust, and that could be a very big problem for the development of this industry altogether. But it could be the other way around, right? Maybe the banks, do not protect their consumers as well as fintechs. Then it will be the other way around. So it's all, it all needs to play out still to see what's going to happen.
Yes, yeah, it's difficult to predict it at this point. So what do you? We touched on the cashless society earlier, but what are your thoughts on a cashless society? And if you do think it's inevitable, what are the barriers there?
I do think it's inevitable. I think the entire world is going towards a cashless society at different speeds. But like, for example, the Nordic countries are the biggest cashless societies in the world, or they have the most transactions and payments being done via digital instruments. Whereas other countries, UK is about 5 years probably behind the Nordics. US, still cash is very important. People love cash in the States, so they're about 10 years probably behind the Nordics. However, the direction, I think it's the same. It's all going towards cashless. The reasons for it, obviously, internet penetration, mobile phone penetration, those are the key factors towards how fast will we get to cashless society in country by country. But also, what we need to understand is that cashless society also sort of puts a strain on the the society as a general, because elderly people might be excluded from this market, or might have trouble or problems adapting to the cashless environment. I think it's going in the same direction at different speeds. Sometime we will all be there.
Yes, there's certainly a generational element to it, because when I go to any shop, or anybody my age goes to a shop, I just assume that they take card. And I'm very surprised when there are occasionally places that don't, and that they take cash. And that seems very strange to me now. But I know that, my dad and my grandparents' generation, that's not the case.
Yes. There is, so, like, but there's another aspect, right? So yeah, the sort of the push towards the cashless society is driven by two things. So one is the new user or the new consumer. So these are, new people, just take, the new generation. For them, funds or sending, like, for example, my son, right? So he deals in Roblox, so which is a digital currency in this game that he plays, and it's very difficult to draw a connection between real funds and real money, which is an outcome of work and effort, into how does that result into virtual currency. So for these people, the value, the money, in the digital area is part of where they are and what they do online, right? It should be as simple as social networks and messaging, sending a picture and whatnot. exchanging funds should be the same. So one driver is this new generation that drive the digital economy and the cashlessness, because they live in the digital world. The other part is the actual financial institutions, I think, that drive the cashless society, but their reasoning is different. Their reasoning is efficiency. They want to cut costs. They don't want to, have physical retail locations. Nobody wants to, transport cash, count cash. There's, fraud related to cash and fraudulent money and so on and so forth. So the financial institutions are driving it from another perspective. So I think we have two very strong drivers for the cashless society. And as the young generation, we get more and more of these XYZ generations. They will continue to demand cashless, and eventually we'll get there.
Yes, and it is very much about that. Demand is what will drive those changes anyway. So that makes sense. We talked about the fact that it's really hard to tell exactly what's going to happen post COVID, whatever that means. But I wondered if you had any ideas on whether there'd be any specific fintech developments created for our digital banking future, for the post-COVID future, or if there are plans for anything that you know of.
So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm not aware of any specific dealings. Like I think everybody, including us at ConnectPay, what we focused on was, hey, we cannot work together in the office anymore. We need to move, and that immediately spikes the risk. And how do we tackle this risk? How do we ensure people can work from home securely, access to data, and so on and so forth? So that was the first sort of leap and the first focus of the development in terms of technology that we did, and process and security and whatnot. So I think that was done by everybody, and one of the things that was discovered was, and I think it was discovered and by many participants of the market that I've been talking to, is it's actually maybe even more efficient to allow people to work from home as long as you control the risks. So I think that's a discovery that that working from home is possible. It's as efficient or even more efficient. It is much more motivating to the people to work from home and so on and so forth. So I think changes related to that, how you work, how you interact with your peers and your customers and so on and so forth, while being on the go or being at home, that will definitely get attention from funding, from the perspective of developments in organizations, and from the perspective of maybe some new fintechs or new services that allow you to facilitate that. So that's number one. Number two, as I mentioned, I don't think the COVID itself will have an impact, but the aftermath of economic hardship will have an impact of what is the next thing in terms of technology being developed in fintechs. I think that's still TBD.
But finally, really, the big question, I suppose, is do you think is it safe to say that digital banking and digital financial services can no longer be thought of as a luxury, but are a necessity at this point?
Absolutely, we see that the world is much more fragile than we thought. We are forced. We are all forced to go online, work from home. Not only work from home, but also access our financial instruments from home, shop online, and so on and so forth. Get government funding and stimulus online without going anywhere, and so on and so forth. It is a necessity. It is definitely not a luxury, and everybody will have to adapt to that. I really, really wish there is. It's less painful. As it is not as painful as it might be, right? For everybody to transition. I just really hope people don't lose on their money. They don't get defrauded. They don't lose their assets. I did see some information on the dark web. So there's actually they are actually selling scam frameworks and scenarios or how-tos online in terms of how to scam or defraud one surplus program or another. So it is very intense. It's pretty much a war out there right now.
And that's a big concern for, you mentioned earlier on, maybe older people or whoever doesn't have a lot of experience in the digital side of finance, then that makes them susceptible to the risk of being defrauded like that.
Yes, especially the vulnerable people. Yes. The youngsters, they probably can handle. But yeah, the vulnerable people, that's going to be a challenge.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast. In association with the Interface.net and CPOstrategy.com, the Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate and review. And don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/The Digital Insight.